Hello and welcome to another episode of The Novel Brain with Dr. E. Today I'm going to have a continued conversation on resilience and particularly talk about an example of something that I came across that just is so profound that I just want to share it with you today, especially in these difficult times. So stay tuned. So, a while back, I did a podcast on the locus of control. And I really talked about this being something individual and internal to a person, and didn't focus so much on the external or that which an individual attributes happens to them because of external factors. And that's absolutely what's happening to us today. So if you're alive and breathing in mid-August of 2020, it is something that is happening to everyone on this planet, and you can't escape the notion of a pandemic. Although some places are more successful than others, that's not the purpose of this particular episode, but really what this is about is the idea that close to 7.5 billion people are aware of this pandemic that's occurring to us right now. So the idea for me has been to find ways to navigate and actually try and thrive in such a difficult time. And I think back to a lot of things. There's this film from, I believe, the late 90s called Life is Beautiful. And whether you agree with the way it was produced or not, the storyline was the main character had a child in the middle of the Holocaust and really protected that child to the point where he made it a game. And the resilience was to show all the beautiful things that occur in such a difficult time, such as the World War II Holocaust. And that stuck with me, and that's been over 20 years now. So I'm still looking for ways that I can navigate and thrive in a time of a great pandemic. And one of those things that just keeps resonating with me is the term resilience. And just what is resilience? Well, let's take a look at it being not only the psychological quality that allows some people to be knocked down by adversity and then come back maybe even stronger than before. It's also letting difficulties or traumatic events, failures, perhaps you're looking at your own life, your job loss, or maybe you got a divorce, or maybe you had some death in your family. Highly resilient people find a way to change the course of that part of their life. They emotionally heal and they continue to move towards their goals despite how difficult it may have been. So I'm just reminded of a couple of things. I came across a TED Talk, and this was Dr. Lucy Hone. She's a resilience expert, and I believe she studied in Philadelphia maybe right around the time I was getting my doctorate. And she was alongside with some colleagues like Martin Seligman, and as you know, is the founder of Positive Psychology, and has done a lot of work in resilience. So I'm not going to go into the research behind it, but I'm going to go into her story. So Dr. Hone explained in her TED Talk that about 6 years ago now, she experienced the sudden death of her daughter, Lucy. And she was then 12 years old, which I think has to be one of the worst possible things that could happen to a person, is lose that son or daughter or a family member to some kind of tragedy. So she explained it with diligence in the notion that she could not lose to this. She quoted something that just really resonated with me, and I want to share, quote unquote, "Don't lose what you have, to what you've lost. And in this talk, I just noted these are the things that I've done in my own life that sometimes I'm very good at and other times I'm not. So it just so happens that this is highlighted by an individual who was an academic who did study this, and then this occurred to her. And that's always so profound to me, why people actually study something in the first place, and then when something profound happens to themselves along the lines of what they're working on, it's even more profound. So she just sort of spelled this out in 3 different ways, the 3 different methods that she has used that have worked for her. And these strategies are as follows. So number 1, we have to acknowledge and accept that struggle is real. So we have to look at the situation in our life in front of us, not with denial or not with minimization, but with just full-on acknowledgement, and in a sense, embracing the worst things that occur to us. And know that this is real, that this is something that we cannot ignore. She later went on to talk about something called selectional attention, and this is kind of where some strategies do fall into place. This is where resilient people focus on things that you can change. And it's not being Pollyanna, it's being positive in a sense where you're looking for the things within the difficult times that you are grateful for. And I know we've all heard about grateful journals, and I spoke about it maybe a dozen times already. So I'm not going to repeat how to do that, but do consider those 3 things that you're grateful for in difficult times, especially, because this can redirect you into thinking with the perspective that you're not catastrophizing the situation in front of you, but rather almost using that situation to bounce back like a trampoline. And it almost happens instantaneously. I can share that this has occurred for me before when, I just thought something so horrible could not be even worse. I immediately went to the things that I was grateful for, and it happened to be the same things that I was grateful for the day before that and the day before that. And then I realized it's true. I don't want to lose what I have to what I may have lost. And that's just another way of losing even further. So that was really important, and that struck a nerve with me. And one thing I want to share with you is, as she went on to talk, it's really apparent to me to just kind of listen in between words. And maybe as a psychologist, that's something I've been just maybe innately trained to do, or maybe that's even part of who I am. But I could just hear in her pauses the great amount of pain that she still experienced 6 years after the death of her daughter. She was able to find almost immediately that she had talked about her 2 other sons, and that she couldn't just give up because she had them. She didn't lose them in this car accident. She also talked about how her daughter Abigail, I believe was her name, Abby, who died, but almost instantaneously. And so there's no pain. There's no long-term illness that she had to suffer. And this is what resilient people do. And this is different than being blindly positive. And I think we all know that there's a major difference, in being blindly positive can be effective, but there's really not that sort of inner desire to actually understand the situation. It's more just blindly going forward with the positive because that's what's worked for you in the past. And again, I'm not saying that that's a bad thing to be positive, but to have resilience, I believe, is very different. And to have the positive resilience in your life is something that we really need to practice and model. In fact, it's been really known that someone's energy is way more memorable than someone's words. And I know words can destroy a lot of things, but energy, on the other hand, is something that's almost just magnetic. You can just feel it with certain people that have this resilience or have the ability to change things based on their outlook and how they even feel with both their internal and external locuses of control, or loci of control, I should say. So this just got me thinking a little bit more, and I kept watching the TED Talk, and I mean, I don't have the attention span that I think I might have had at one point, and these are only usually typically about 20 minutes long. But she just captivated me into thinking, well, what was the third strategy? And it really is asking yourself, is what you're doing at this time helping or harming you? Do you have control over your situation, or do you reach for a drink or a smoke? Are you being kind to yourself, or are you putting yourself on hold so that you can ignore or maybe just not think about it, or passively, just aggressively even forget about things, numb things? And according to her experience, this is her most powerful tool. I would agree that this is absolutely important, to be kind to yourself and then notice that the things that you're doing are either benefiting you or completely destroying you. And so with this, I want to talk about your energy and your vibe towards not just others, but yourself. And I know that I've been one in my own life to look at my own internal locus of control, my external locus of control, and currently not having really any kind of control over what may be occurring around me. It makes me feel even more empowered to acknowledge my control over what I can actually control. If that makes any sense, what I'm really getting at is you can't lose what you have to what you've lost. That just is so powerful to me that in a time of grief, we have to look at all these things. And sometimes we need examples of people who have gone before us who have lost an infant or a child. I know my own mother, so many years ago, I lost a brother I did not know, and he died at 18 months. I can't even imagine what that would feel like to lose your baby. And even till this day, she's 82 years old now, she still speaks of that as if it were yesterday. So this is not something that we overcome or forget about, but it's something that we acknowledge and accept that this is real, that this could happen, that we then have the choice for selectional attention to focus on the positive things and grateful things in your life. And then we have to ask ourselves, what do we do moving forward? So this is all very important. I mean, I got off a phone call just this morning with a colleague, somebody I just met actually, and just thinking about adversity and the fact that we have no control over things like car accidents and major health issues that may arise, that we have no real way of knowing that this is going to happen. We have no guarantee in life. It's not as if we popped out, or actually as if we became a father one day or a mother one day and the baby came with a guarantee that nothing would happen. And in fact, that would be very strange, because the truth is that something will inevitably happen, and something always happens. And, to go back to some literature, when things do fall apart, what do we do? So it's almost that we have to absolutely accept the struggle is real. We can't believe Instagram. And in fact, I mean, if you do, I'm almost sorry for you to believe that people are just so amazingly living these lives, that we just want to be just like them, or we want to change something in our own lives. That could actually lead to a spiral of complete personal negativity, where you could be actually living, a fake life. I guess, for another way of putting it, there is really no other way of putting it. I'm just all about the real right now, and I think the real in resilience is to know that there is struggle for everyone, no matter who you are on this planet. And as a psychologist and therapist, I can say I've definitely dove down that road with so many different people, clients, patients in the past, as well as colleagues, who many times have not even noticed that this struggle occurs to everyone else and has thought that this is only specific to them. So losing a child would be one of the worst things ever, as I mentioned, and it happens every day. And unfortunately, I'm not saying be ready because it's going to happen to you. What I'm saying is, if unfortunately that were to happen to you, you have to move forward. You cannot lose what you have because what you've lost. Now, the selectional attention is really all within our control. So when you're thinking about focusing on what you're grateful for, it may seem like a torture experiment when you just lost something, but the truth is that we have to look at the stages of grief, and if we're not ready to do this, then this is not the right time. You have to be ready. See a qualified therapist or see somebody who can help you, someone trusted that can help you guide your way to finding these things that are grateful for. And again, ask yourself at any given moment, is what you're doing helping or harming you? And for the last part of this episode, I really just want to identify some strategies for becoming more resilient. And, we have to look at ourselves always to see where we are. Do we demand perfect things in our lives? Do we not acknowledge our inadequacies, or potentially we blame things on other people's inadequacies and therefore don't work on our own things? So in any of these cases, the quality is that you have to, no matter what, build your own level of resilience, because that's your responsibility. And ultimately, bad things are going to happen in life. And we're all in one right now. So what is it that we're doing in order to navigate and potentially even thrive within the difficulty? So the first thing I would think about is developing healthy habits. And I did an episode earlier on habits and change. And if you need to, maybe mark that and listen to that, that would help in getting you to change some of your own habits in your own life. So again, you have to be self-aware of what you're doing. Are you getting enough sleep? Are you eating well? Are you even exercising? Are you able to reduce stress? And in turn, if you do these things, you're going to be able to boost your resilience. So in a similar sense, are you nurturing close relationships? Are you finding support where you need it? When trouble arises, do you have anybody you can go to? Just regularly thinking about these types of things actively help you to become more resilient. So as we're in a crisis with this pandemic, we have to understand that we do have some control over some things. We can increase our self-care, and it can be very difficult to do that when you already think you're doing enough. But we can focus on these aspects of the situation that are under our control versus all the things that we have no control over. So I know that I talked about the locus of control and the internal versus the external. Well, is it possible to change an external locus of control? Well, I used to think maybe not, because when a pandemic comes, here it is, and you don't know if you're going to get it. You don't know if you're going to get a virus infection. But the truth is it is possible to change your external locus of control. So you can bring that external locus of control inward, but it requires a significant mindset change. So like any skill, it's going to take practice and repetition. It really helps to work on being decisive, taking concrete actions when faced with an adversity, rather than responding passively. So if you respond passively, you have no control over what happens with the outcome of the dangerous and difficult things that are occurring to you. So again, remember, just work on being decisive, take some concrete actions. It might not feel comfortable, but in the long run, you'll notice that these decisions aren't going to necessarily change everything, and a bad decision cannot be made in a crisis situation unless, of course, you're making bad decision after bad decision based on maybe not listening to science, or maybe you're not really understanding the nature behind whatever's in front of you. But also remember that failure can help you. So in the event you make a bad decision, this is not a time at this point to just focus on the setback, but rather how you move forward. So there's not one person on this planet that has been successful based on not making any failures in their life. And in fact, if you talk to successful people, they've made so many failed attempts at things that they've just accepted their failure. And there's a benefit to accepting that failure. It's becoming okay with your mistakes to help build better emotional regulation. This definitely benefits people in a wide variety of domains. Now, this is everything from personal relationships to workplace to just inner work. And acknowledging that life is filled with failures, that you could repeat your failures, and you really can't beat yourself up over this, because accepting the setback can provide this massive lesson for you to move forward with resilience. So I'm going to leave you with something that I don't think Dr. Hone had spoke about in her TED Talk, but something that I personally feel is one of the most, I think, beneficial strategies when faced with some kind of crises, and that is to have the power to reframe your situation. How often are we not looking outside of ourselves for another perspective of what's happening, and how often are we looking to the internet to give us some answers for, why is this happening, or what's going to happen next? So again, that is something that is in your external locus of control. We can really control our internal locus, and then therefore have more power over our external world if we're making the decisions based on our own personal data and the things that we do come up with, the knowledge that we need. So it's perception, everyone, and it comes down to focusing on gaining a different perspective on your life at all times. I think what is key here is to reframe the perspective from what you think may happen to potentially what might happen in a different instance. There's so many variables in such an uncertain world that one activity that I use to open your mind to reframe your perspective is that old and young woman gestalt image. I don't know if anybody remembers this, but it's pretty big. It's been around psychology for so many years. But if you look at the image, you may see just an old woman, or you may see just the young woman, or some of you may see both. For those who see the image one way, I just ask that you believe that you're able to see it both ways. So many clients will often state, I can see that both ways. And then you can kind of take that activity to say, why do you believe it's just one way versus the other? So in other words, it's looking at this world with so many perspectives that we don't really ever have all the answers, and that's okay. Don't be anxious to not make a decision to the point where you're frozen and you're sitting on the sidelines of your own life because you've just been hijacked your life because of something that you have no control over. So you do have some control over things. You can make decisions within these difficult times. And in a crisis, it feels heightened, but you'll even feel more empowered when you do make these decisions for you and your family. Make safety decisions. That feels really good. That's a self-help way of looking at your life, is to buy healthy foods. We have a lot of evidence on how this actually works. Your nutrition is so important. So with that, I'm going to leave you into hoping that you can actually build your resilience just with these 3 sort of basic steps, and then also acknowledging the part that I included on perspective. You can't see your life through a tunnel. It's not myopic, and there's just not one hourglass to look at. You have so many ways and variables to do things in your life, and to change those things is really entirely up to you. All right, so that's it for now. I hope to hear you next time and see you next time on the Novel Brain. Keep those comments coming in. I appreciate that. And we'll talk soon.